Hi, I'm Pamela, and if you're new here, I breed British Shorthairs in Perth, Western Australia. I have a passion for cat breeding, and I'm here to share my experience and knowledge with you. This series is for new breeders, but if you've been doing it a while, stick around as you might pick up a tip or two. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the 3 different types of breeding cats, and I'll let you in on a little secret. 2 of them are actually the same cat. Now, back when I first started breeding, all those years ago in 2004, I actually started with 3 cats, and there was 1 of each of these types of cats. As a new breeder, it's good to have an understanding of these different types of cats, and this is really going to help you when it comes to planning out your breeding program. Now, the first cat that I want to talk about is the starter cat. That might sound pretty self-explanatory, but it is actually the cat that gets you started, the first cat that you start out with when you start breeding. It's not going to be the best cat you ever buy. Everybody wants to get a show cat, everybody wants to get the cat with the best ears, the best coat, the best eye colour. But the reality is, at the very beginning, you need to take what you can get, and often it's not going to have those features. My very first cat was a starter cat. Now, I bought this cat as a pet cat. In between putting a deposit on this cat and getting her as a baby kitten, I started showing my domestic cat. I got interested in it, I really got hooked on the hobby, and I knew that when I got my new cat, I wanted to show her too. I also then realised that I probably wanted to breed. So I was very lucky. Back then, early desexing was a very new thing, and my cat hadn't been desexed when I asked the breeder, could I breed from her? The breeder thought about it, we'd been having a lot of conversations, we built up a rapport, and she said yes, I could do it. I did have to pay a little bit more money, and we had to get her paperwork changed, but she suddenly went from being a pet cat to being a breeding cat. Now, you probably know pet cats are not necessarily the best quality because as breeders, we keep our best cats for ourselves. Even as a new breeder, you will know that pet cats and breeding cats and show cats are 3 different things. They're all different levels of quality, and we're trying to achieve the cat that's closest to the breed standard. And that starter cat that you get is probably not going to be very close at all. So I had my new kitten, I was very excited. I got her at the end of the year, so there weren't any shows until the following year. And when she went into her first show, she was actually an adult class. I was so excited to show her, and I put her in the show. And in her first judging, the judge withheld the challenge certificate. Oh my goodness. Now, if you know anything about showing, that means that the judge decided that she wasn't good enough to get the certificate that you get to have to cash in later for titles. Champion, grand champion, that kind of thing. She was the only blue female there, and she still didn't get it. I asked the judge afterwards why, and the judge explained to me that it was because her coat was very fluffy and open, and probably a little bit long. And it really was. There were other things that weren't so great about her, but there were things that were really good about her, and she did go on to breed some lovely kittens for me. So I had to start out with that cat, who didn't even get a challenge at her first show, as my first breeding cat. And that's fine. That's how it's probably going to be for you too. Now, when you get a starter cat, please don't let anybody judge you for the quality of your cat, because it's what you can get, and it's getting harder and harder for new breeders to get breeding cats and get started in this hobby. I love breeding cats. It's a wonderful hobby. I'm clearly passionate about it, and I think that everybody else should be able to be part of it too. The problem is that those people actually need to get cats to get started, and a lot of established breeders are not so keen to sell cats to new people. When you first get a starter cat, you might have to buy it from somebody who's a little bit more focused on the dollars and a little bit less focused on the breed standard and the type of the cat. And that's okay too. It can be very much a situation of if you have the money, you can have the cat, regardless of whether that cat's a good example of the breed or not. It's okay to get a cat like that to get you started if you need to. And although you would aspire to have something better, it's better to have a cat and get started than not have a cat at all. So that's the starter cat. Some people might judge you based on the quality of your cats at the beginning. Don't worry about it, because everybody has to start somewhere, and people do tend to forget that they didn't necessarily start with the very best cats either. So if your cats have big ears, don't worry about that. We can fix that later. If your cat's got the wrong type of tail, you can fix that later too. As long as you're aware of what it is, as long as you've read the breed standard and you understand what your cat should look like, then you've got a really good chance of taking that starter cat that may not be perfect and breeding forward from it to produce something that is. The second type of cat that I want to talk about is a cat that I call the cheapie. Now, the cheapie is a cat that you're not looking for, but it's available and you think, why not? I call them cheapies because they're often cheap. So even though they're not your dream cat, they're a cat that's available and it's worth getting them to add to your program. It might be because a breeder's giving up breeding and they might be selling off their breeding cats. It might be that it's a cat that you're getting from a friend. The third cat that I got when I first started breeding was a cheapie. Now, she came to me because I'd been looking around for another cat. I had a boy at that stage and he did not get along well with my first girl. No, it wasn't going to happen. Looking back now as an experienced breeder, I think there was a few things I did wrong and probably today I'd have no problem. But back then they were not going to mate. It wasn't going to happen. So I thought I need to get another cat to go with my boy. I started looking around and back then we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have a lot of things that we have today. It was a while ago. And I went onto one of the groups that was available for breeders. It was kind of like a Gumtree for breeders. It was just a big list of people listing out cats they had available. Some were pets, some were breeding, sometimes they were selling equipment, different things like that. And there was a listing there for a British Shorthair and she was in Queensland. She was a lilac, she was a young adult, and I thought, oh, this could be exactly what I'm looking for. And she was very cheap. So all in, she didn't cost me very much to get to Perth, even including the airfare. She arrived safely. When she first arrived, she started doing this thing where she was eating her food and dropping it on the floor. I didn't realise what it was then, but I know now. She had something going on with her mouth. So I took her to the vets because she just arrived and I didn't know when she'd last been vaccinated. So I thought, I'm going to take her in, get that done, have a look and see what's going on. She felt a little bit bony as well. I took her to the vets and the vet examined her and said to me, oh, she's got a bit of a broken tooth and it's causing a problem with her jaw. So it's uncomfortable for her to eat, which is why she'd been eating her food and then dropping it on the floor and then eating it and dropping it, eating it and dropping it. And that's probably why she was a bit bony. So we vaccinated her and then soon after that she went under anaesthetic and she had the tooth dealt with. It had to be taken down and smoothed off and everything was fine. Once I got her home, she started eating again. She was doing great. She was putting on a lot of weight. I was really happy. She was just getting a little bit fatter than I expected though. And I had had 1 litter already. And I looked at her and I thought to myself, oh, something's going on here. I think you're pregnant. Back to the vets we went. Yep, pregnant. Now, when I bought her, I spoke to the lady on the phone and she told me that she was going out of British Shorthairs, which was the reason I was able to get her. And again, the reason that she was a cheapie, because the lady wasn't going to breed them anymore. She was going to concentrate on her rag dolls. She told me that she'd already sold her stud cat. And this was the last female she had in British. So she'd already sold her stud cat. I said to her, I'm just ringing to let you know Rosie's pregnant. She said, oh, that's wonderful. That's great news. There was a bit of an uncomfortable pause. And then she said, oh, but maybe you didn't want her to be pregnant. Well, no, I didn't. But I was a little bit more concerned about the fact that she'd sold her stud. She said, oh, my grandson must have let the cats in together. Now, if I had money for every time somebody said their grandson, cousin, wife, daughter, whoever let the cats together, I'd be very rich by now. Anyway, the next thing I said was, who's the dad? She said, oh, that'll be my Alfie. Still wasn't getting the answer I wanted. So I said, what breed is Alfie? And she was a little bit indignant when she said, a British Shorthair, of course. Oh my goodness, I was so relieved it wasn't the rag doll. I said, oh, you told me you sold your stud. She said, no, I had 2. So Rosie was actually pregnant and I had got a cheapie cat and I'd also got a free mating, I guess. And she went on to have kittens for me. She had 2 beautiful kittens. She had Ricky and she had Katie. Now Ricky, sadly we said goodbye to him last year, but Katie, she's now about 16 years old, still going strong, still fabulously healthy. Now Rosie has made a really big contribution to my breeding program. Rosie doesn't have the right eye shape. Rosie's coat is not the right texture. Rosie doesn't really have the right head shape. But from Rosie and Katie and Ricky, I have got some really fabulous cats with some really wonderful temperaments. And if you look at the cats I'm breeding today, you can trace them all back to Rosie. And so she made a really big contribution to my breeding, and I'm really grateful for that. I still have Rosie, she still lives with us. She's got renal failure now. She is quite an older cat. She's a senior now, definitely. I also have her great-great-great-grandchildren who are doing really well and still my breeding cat. So that's a line that's gone on for a long time. And I'm really, really pleased that one of my very first cats is still there today, in even a small way, in the cats that I'm breeding today. So she was definitely a cheapie. Again, don't let people judge you about what kind of quality cats you have in terms of starter cats or in terms of cheapies, because Rosie's a good example where she went on to contribute in a very big way to my breeding. I have another cat that I got as a cheapie. Somebody was selling her and I thought, I want to buy her because I don't want her to go to someone who maybe isn't as good a breeder and maybe doesn't have the ethics that I do. She wasn't very expensive for me to buy, and what I thought I'd do was have a litter from her which would reimburse me her purchase price, and then I could de-sex her and find her a wonderful home. I ended up having 2 litters from her, but I did de-sex her and I did find her a fabulous home, and I still get photos of her laying on the bed. Now, she had a very average coat, she had big ears, she didn't have a lot going for her, but she had a fabulous temperament as well. Putting her to the right choice of boys, I was actually able to produce some really, really nice kittens. I kept a female and I've now got her grandson. So she's another example of a cat that just became available. In this circumstance, I wasn't actually thinking about what was in it for me. I was thinking about the cat and doing the right thing by her. And it turned out she did the right thing by me because she actually made a really good contribution to my breeding program. And I'm really happy with the cats that I've got that have come from her line. So what's the difference between a cheapie and a starter cat? Well, actually nothing. They're the same cat. It's just that you get one when you start breeding and you get one just because it becomes available. So I could still buy a cheapie cat today. I can't buy a starter cat again because I've already started breeding, but that's the difference between the two. One is you've got to take what you can get at the beginning, and the other one is taking advantage of a cat that just comes along and that might actually be able to make a contribution to your breeding program. A word of warning about cheapie cats though, you don't want to get too many and you don't want to get too many at once. You need to have other cats to breed them with to be able to go forward and make improvements in your program. You also don't want to have too many cats at the beginning. So whilst you can get more than one starter cat, you don't want to get too many starter cats, because you don't want to get into the situation where you haven't had a litter yet and you've got 7 cats calling and then you have 7 litters. It's a lot all at once. It's a much better idea to start out like I did, with one starter cat, then another cat, then another cat, and then you go forward from there. The third type of cat I want to talk to you about is called an investment cat. Now, an investment cat is the cat of your dreams. It might be a show cat, it might be a cat of a certain colour or a certain pattern. It might be a cat from a breeder that you really admire. It could come in the form of a swap, it could also come in the form of a mating. Chances are though, this cat is going to be expensive when you compare it to your starter cat and maybe any cheapies that you might have purchased. I was really lucky when I first started breeding. The second cat I ever bought was an investment cat. That doesn't happen very often, but I was really, really lucky. The internet, like I said, was not like it is today, and we used to send emails, and even that was pretty new. So I sent an email to my cat's breeder, and I must have said the right things because she was willing to sell me a boy. I wanted a blue bicolour, and that was what I was getting. I flew to Melbourne and I saw him at a show, and then I took him home with me. He was very expensive compared to my other cats, he really was, but he was worth it because he actually went on to have a really, really wonderful show career. He won at nationals, he won at local shows, he won Supremes. He was still being shown until he was 10 years old. He produced some wonderful, wonderful kittens with fabulous temperaments, really good types, really great markings, and he actually made a really huge contribution to my breeding. So he was actually a really good investment, and I was really excited that I was able to get him so early in my breeding program. Investment cats need to be something you need or something you want. So maybe that's a colour, maybe that's a pattern, maybe that's a blood type. Or it needs to be a cat that's going to upgrade. Now, what's upgrading? Upgrading means producing better kittens than the parent. Often you'll get the stud as the investment and you'll use the stud with your girls and produce better girls from that and then go on to keep them and breed forward from them. So that's upgrading, and you can often do that with an investment cat or an investment mating. So let's put this all together. When you first start breeding, you get a starter cat or two, and you maybe get an outside mating and keep a few kittens to breed from. If you're lucky, a cheapy cat or two will become available and you can add them into your program and see what you can do with them. You work on getting an investment cat, the cat that gives you what you want, your dream cat. And then when that happens, that's when the fun starts. You start upgrading and you start breeding cats that have your own prefix, and they start getting better and better. The more you breed, the better and easier this becomes. The way I like to think of it is that you're actually putting together a recipe. It's a recipe made up of different cats, and you're putting them together and breeding the type of cat that you want to breed. Now, it obviously is going to reflect the breed standard for your breed. We definitely want to breed cats that are bred to the right type, but also breeders have their own individual look and feel to their cats. They have certain temperaments to their cats, and they have certain features that they think are more important than others. So you're really going to be able to mix that all in together, create your own personal recipe, and that'll be what you breed forward from. You'll add in cats here, you'll add in cats there, maybe you'll get a mating from this person, maybe you'll get another cat will become available to you from someone else. All of these go together, and again, it's about creating that personal recipe that is going to be reflected in your prefix and your breeding. I hope you enjoyed that explanation of the 3 different types of breeding cats. I've got a lot more information to share with you, and I'd really like to hear what you'd like to know about. So in the comments below, tell me what you'd like to know and what I can help you with. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, Cat Breeding for Beginners. See you next time.